What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com, and we have a little bit of a Chris Jones update to discuss. So, star defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones, decided to hop back on social media this afternoon and give fans a little bit of an update on where things stand in his contract negotiations. About an hour before recording this video, a curious fan tweeted at Chris Jones on Twitter and said, "So when you going to show up? Because you be playing too much on Twitter and social media. You've been an all-pro on social media during training camp. You're under contract for this year, correct? For how much money? Man, I bet it's rough to live on $20 million in a year." Chris Jones would end up replying to this Twitter user, and he said, "Week 8, in response to the question, when are you going to show up?" And of course, Chiefs fans are going absolutely insane on Twitter right now and on social media, because this seems to be a shift in tune from Chris Jones, who was tweeting a few weeks ago like he was going to be back for week 1 and he wasn't sure what the future held, but he was going to try to have fun this year. You know, he's under contract for 1 more year. And he made it sound like he's at least going to play out this year. Furthermore, Twitter account at Arrowhead Live quoted Chris Jones saying week 8 and said that'd be a hefty tab. Chris Jones replied to Arrowhead Live saying that he can afford it. Again, this is a drastic change in tune from Chris Jones, who a few weeks ago sounded like, at worst, even if nothing got done in terms of a contract extension, that he was going to be back by the time the regular season started. Now he's saying that he could sit out until week 8 of the regular season. And not only is this a change in tune from just a couple weeks ago, but things have really fallen off a cliff since Chris Jones tweeted out before the offseason began that he would be a Kansas City Chief for life and he would never play for another franchise. Most Chiefs fans felt pretty confident at that point that that was true, that Chris Jones would be here for a long time and he would sign an extension with Kansas City. If you ask those same Chiefs fans today if they thought Chris Jones would still be on this team beyond this year, I feel like about half of them would be hesitant to say that he's going to be on this team for the foreseeable future. So how are we as Chiefs fans supposed to interpret this? Is this a big deal? Is Chris Jones serious about sitting out regular season games? Let's discuss that. Initially, I didn't think Chris Jones would sit out regular season games. I expected this thing, whether or not they agreed to a contract extension, Chris Jones and the Chiefs, to kind of be swept under the rug or go by the wayside by the regular season. And Chris Jones would return and he'd play out the last year of his contract. But I did mention with Michael Darcy in my last few videos that we did that I wouldn't 100% rule out Chris Jones sitting out regular season games. Chris Jones strikes me as the type of guy that is willing to do that. He's not afraid to do that. Remember, guys, Chris Jones was really good friends with Le'Veon Bell. And Chris Jones has sat out once before. He's serious about his money. He's serious about sitting out. And Le'Veon Bell is a guy that has sat out regular season games. Back when he held out for a contract from the Steelers and he was serious about his money, he sat out regular season games. And you can argue whether or not that was the right move or if that was the right thing to do for Le'Veon Bell. But ultimately, he ended up getting paid by the New York Jets as a free agent. Yeah, things didn't go right with the Jets for Le'Veon Bell, but Le'Veon Bell just wanted the money, and he got what he wanted. Chris Jones, I think he wants to be a Chief. I think what he said was true. He doesn't want to play for another franchise, but at the end of the day, for all these players, every single one of them, yes, winning is important. Yes, being with the team that drafted them is important, but they want the money. Chris Jones wants the money. And in my mind, he has every right to sit out for that money. He has every right to sit out for that contract. We've seen what these other defensive tackles have been getting paid this offseason, and Chris Jones is better than just about all of them. And for him to be getting paid less than those guys, look, I would understand it. If I was working at my job and I felt like I was better than the people that were getting raises that worked with me, then I'd be pretty upset too. And some people will rebut with the fact that this is kind of how the market works. Chris Jones signed an extension a few years ago. He agreed to that contract. If he wanted more money, he should have gotten it at the time. But I also feel like that's a little unfair to the player because they can't predict how the market is going to go at the time they sign that contract. And if Chris Jones didn't sign that last contract extension, then he wouldn't be a member of the Chiefs. And I think that was important to him at the time, as much as getting paid was. I still think that's true, but again, Chris Jones, you could argue, has been underpaid for a while. I haven't really heard this point brought up a lot when people discuss getting a Chris Jones extension done, but remember they did pay Frank Clark 5 years, $105 million. That was still more than Chris Jones ever got from the Chiefs. And they gave Frank Clark that before they even extended Chris Jones. And since that happened, I always kind of felt like in the back of my head that Chris Jones kind of looked at the Chiefs funny after that. Like, why is this guy walking in the door? He's not even as good as me, and you guys just give him $100 million, and then you won't give me what I want. And I think that irked Chris Jones a little bit. He will never say that publicly. A lot of people don't think about it. They don't think to talk about it. But I think when the Chiefs gave Frank Clark $100 million and they ended up only giving Chris Jones like 4 for 80 or 4 for 85, that was a little bit of a slap in the face to Chris Jones. And now, since I think Chris Jones, he really could have sat out for a long time last time and gotten more money if he wanted to. He could have done that. He would have had every right. And he did. He ended up signing a good contract with the Chiefs back then. But I think this time he's looking to get that money that he didn't get last time. Chris Jones is a top 2 defensive tackle in this league, and you can very easily make the case that he's the best defensive tackle in the league. And for him to be getting paid like the 6th or 7th best, it's just not very fair. And I'm not sure how you could necessarily have a problem with Chris Jones sitting out. Yes, he agreed to a contract earlier on, but this is just kind of how it works in the NFL. If guys feel like they're not being paid fairly, they'll sit out until they get a better contract. I guarantee you Patrick Mahomes would do the same thing if he felt like he was severely underpaid, and he's not going to risk injury going out there and throwing in a preseason game if he's in the middle of a contract dispute with the team. I've been consistent throughout this entire saga that Chris Jones is the type of player that you just hand a blank check to and you do whatever it takes to keep him. I've said before with Michael Darcy of KC Sports Report, I've said you can just extend Chris Jones for 4 or 5 years, make the first 3 years the only real years of the contract that matter, and then in the 4th and 5th year, they're almost like dummy years, or that's when the contract starts to wind down and you can play with it and do different things like restructure or cut him, and you get a lot more cap savings, kind of like the Frank Clark deal. Frank Clark, they signed him to a 5-year deal, but as we saw in the last 2 years of the contract, there was a lot they could do to maneuver the money so that it didn't kill the team. Because I know people, when they talk about Chris Jones, they don't want to give him too much money and then end up crippling the team in the future. But the problem is, when you look at this team and the scope of the next 2 to 3 years, I don't think they can win a Super Bowl without Chris Jones on their defensive line. I don't think they can win without him on their defense. I don't think he's a replaceable type of player. Tyreek Hill was different, but the best pass rushing defensive tackle in the league, that's going to be very hard to replace. He's the Patrick Mahomes of the defense, and you just got to turn on that AFC Championship game from last year, guys, and that'll remind you that this team is not going anywhere without Chris Jones, not for the foreseeable future. There will be a day where they have to replace Chris Jones and move on, which is why I say you can just extend him for the next 4 to 5 years, and then you can figure out what to do in the last couple years of the deal. And you can structure the contract where it's not going to cripple the team in the last couple of years. And Chris Jones may very well be a serviceable player in the last couple of years of that deal. It's not even like he's going to be a bad player. People are just assuming that's going to be the case. But if that's what you're afraid of, just structure the contract in a way that makes sure that you're not crippling the team in the last couple of years. But I want Chris Jones on this team for the next few years. The Chiefs need him on this team for the next few years, and I just really hope this gets resolved, man. I do not want to see Chris Jones sit out regular season games, because we saw what this defense looks like without him in the first couple of preseason games. The pass rush is hurting. The defensive line doesn't have enough without him. If Chris Jones is sitting out regular season games, that's going to spell massive trouble for the Kansas City Chiefs and their defense in the regular season. So I want to hear from you guys. How concerned are you with Chris Jones sitting out regular season games? Do you think he's serious about doing this? It does seem like Chris Jones likes to troll a little bit, so maybe he's just having fun with this and this is nothing to look into. But do you guys think he's serious about this? How concerned are you on a scale from 1 to 10 that Chris Jones sits out regular season games? Let me know down in the comments. Would love to hear from you guys. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. Turn on that notification bell for new posts, and check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. And I will see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!